Every dogfight is a battle that combines man and machine. A unique blend of cold, hard technology with human instinct, intellect, and passion. At their very best, combat pilots virtually meld with their aircraft, the plane becoming an almost living extension of the person who flies it. Gregory Boyington is just such a pilot. Like a lot of future World War II aces, his passion for flying started early.
Really, what inspired him to have a desire to fly was a childhood ride in an airplane that visited his town. And that was common when he was a boy during that era in the 1920s. They were called barnstormers, and these people would fly from town to town and put on air shows and also give rides. And he was hooked from then on. And the cadet program, which he entered, came about in the mid-1930s and offered the opportunity for a good paying job in the Depression and an opportunity to fulfill that desire to fly.
But even though he's achieved his dream of flying, this is far from the end of the rainbow for Boyington. Indeed, his entire life is an uphill battle against the same long odds he'll face over a ball in 1944.
Almost from birth, Gregory Boyington was somebody who defied the odds. He had a lot of childhood near misses as far as accidents are concerned. He was very rough and tumble on the schoolyard. He never shied away from a fight, even if he didn't have much of a chance to win. And he would keep attacking an opponent, even if that person had beaten him before. So he had an aggressive spirit and just a knack of surviving against the odds. And really, those served him well when he decided to become a Marine and fly for the Marine Corps.
Yet these very same qualities also have a downside, especially in an outfit that's as dedicated to strict discipline as the U.S. Marine Corps.
He was obstinate, and he was really unconventional. He wasn't a spit and polish Marine in appearance, and he would butt heads with superior officers just because of his personality. His Marine Corps career was not going very well because of his conduct.
Then in 1941, several months before the U.S. is forced into World War II, Boyington joins the American Volunteer Group. Nicknamed the Flying Tigers, the AVG fights against the Japanese, who invade China in 1937.
These pilots, even though supporting the Chinese government, they were flying for a company, and the Chinese government would pay that company for the kills they accumulated. And so it was certainly in Boyington's best interest to score as many kills as possible. And for all the pilots, it was a chance to make some money and also just have the thrill of flying in combat.
It's in China that Boyington first displays his outstanding abilities as a combat pilot.
He loved to fight, so that was one attribute right there. But he also had that special knack of survival. He had a sixth sense that he knew when he could go into a situation, and then he also knew when to have some caution. And he always had that belief that no matter how tough it got, it was going to be okay. And as one flying tiger told me, Boyington could sit up all night drinking and then the next day outfly almost anybody. So that shows his inherent talent as a pilot.
When the U.S. does enter the war following the attack on Pearl Harbor, Boyington transfers back to the Marines. Shortly afterwards, he takes command of VMF 214, the Black Sheep Squadron. It's here that he gets a nickname, but it's not the one he's famous for.
It was around the time that the Navy issued this cartoon. It was called Grandpa Pettibone. And what this was a training aid. It was this old man, this old geezer who would tell you in the message of the cartoon what you were doing wrong as far as aviation was concerned. And Boyington, even though he wasn't the oldest person in the squadron, he was near the oldest, so they took to calling him Gramps. And that's what all the pilots called him. They never really called him Pappy at all.
Ironically, the nickname Pappy is partly the result of Boyington's heavy drinking, a problem that will trouble him throughout his life.
There was one pilot, Lieutenant Mullen, who knew a drinking song from Yale, and the name Gramps didn't quite fit into the lyrics he coined, so he chose Pappy, which did fit in. And the press seized on the name Pappy because of that drinking song.
Pappy Boyington quickly leads the Black Sheep to fame during their epic air battles over Rabaul. This is especially true when Pappy's kill total starts to mount, each day getting closer to the hallowed figure of 26.
That was a hallowed figure because Eddie Rickenbacker had achieved that in World War I. And so that was really the mark that you wanted to attain, and Boyington was marching towards that mark when he was flying. So that was really what his command tour existed of, was flying repeated missions to Rabaul.
How does Pappy achieve so many kills so quickly? Part of the answer is his amazing flying skill. Another is the great technical capability of his F4U Corsair. But as we know, there's also a third element, tactics. Not surprisingly, Pappy's aerial tactics mirror his aggressive personality.
One of Pappy's favorite tactics was to dive on his victim from out of the sun, dive below the target's altitude, and pull up in his blind spot underneath to very close range before he opened fire. Sometimes he waited and got so close before he opened fire that the target would explode in his face and little pieces would damage his aircraft. Normally he fought in a section with the wingman, but he was very aggressive and he didn't hesitate to continue a fight if he lost his wingman.
In general, however, U.S. Marine Corsair tactics are a little less reckless.
Marine Corps F4U Corsairs at this time normally would fly in divisions of 4 fighters arranged in a wide finger 4 formation. The leader in the center, wingman to one side, and the second section to the other side. We'd combine these divisions in squadron formations for patrols and fighter sweeps. Typically, they would sweep and patrol at high altitude, around 20,000 feet, to give them an altitude advantage over the enemy. They'd normally attack by divisions out of the sun, and they'd normally leave at least one division high for high cover in case they were surprised by the enemy. Once they got in a fight, they tried to fight in 2 plane elements, a fighting wing sort of doctrine with the leader doing most of the firing, and the wingman flying formation and about a 30-degree cone around his tail.
Yet even with the Corsair's superiority over the Zero in many areas, Corsair drivers always have to respect the still dangerous Japanese fighter.
Like most American fighters in the Pacific at this time, they could not turn with a Zero, and they really couldn't climb with a Zero at optimum airspeed either. So the Corsairs would use hit-and-run tactics where they would dive on the target, normally out of the sun if they could. They would turn with the target only so long as they could hold him in the gun sight for the proper lead for the gunshot. At that point, they would dive away to get some separation and then perform a high-speed, shallow climb so that they could turn around and come back and re-engage. If they were defensive, the F4s liked to turn and attack head-on because they had a big engine out in front of them, had good heavy firepower, and the Japanese aircraft were lightly armored.
If the Corsairs are flying in 2 sections of 2 and are attacked from behind by the Zeros, they will normally employ the thatch weave as a defensive tactic. Although first devised for use by F4F Wildcats, the principle with Corsairs is exactly the same.
The 2 sections would be at least 1 turn diameter apart, which is about 600 feet or so minimum. That would allow them to turn toward each other, meet in the center, and then reverse their turn direction and repeat it. This maneuver forced the enemy to pick one section or the other, and whichever section they picked, and if they decided to follow them around to shoot, the other section could meet them head-on for a head-on shot.
On the other side, the Japanese are not only upgrading the Zero, but are also changing their tactics.
About this time, the Japanese Navy was in transition from the 3-plane Shotai to the 4-plane Buntai. The reason for this was that after the initial attack, each pilot would engage and fight individually. This took a lot of experience to be able to do that. By this point in the war, the Japanese Navy had lost most of its experienced pilots. By arranging a 4-ship flight, the Buntai, then it only took 1 experienced leader to lead a 4-ship flight, and then they could actually fight in 2-ship elements, with the more experienced leader leading the less experienced wingman.
By January 1944, Pappy Boyington is on the verge of breaking Eddie Rickenbacker's record of 26 victories. U.S. planes, including his Black Sheep Squadron, pound Rabaul on an almost daily basis. But the Zeros defending Rabaul still have plenty of fight left. The stage is set for Pappy's mission on January 3rd.